Hi again. This is the other lecture, the second lecture I was going to give you on harmonic possibilities that I put together for you. It was suggested that you wanted to see my picture on the screen. I've tried several ways. I'm going to try this way today. Even gives me a little notepad to write on if I want to. It's not ideal for the presentation because if I hit the present button, then it ends up looking like this. Although you can do that on your own, I suppose. Um, Fun little boxes there, but we'll look at like this for now. So, and maybe at some points, if I think you need to see the music, I might actually put it up into larger presentation. So we're going to talk again more about types of harmonic possibilities. This time we're going to talk about horizontal movement and texture. So, and horizontal means linear. So we talked about vertical last week, which are like chords, just the way that things are stacked on top. Now we're also going to talk about motion. Linear means the going this direction, right? Yeah, hand gestures help, I guess. Haven't written anything on the notepad yet, but we'll see. All right, so tertian harmony. While tertian harmony is normally taught as the fundamental to Western music, and often the first thing one thinks of when harmonizing, there are probably more varieties of its application than you might realize. As a basis of certain kinds of most common music practiced from 1650 to 1900, we are often first taught the application called common practice tonality. You may have heard this before. Common practice tonality. This was the common used practice of how music evolved to function from 1650 to 1900. So, what we study in theory class is actually looking back and describing that through history, although in fact it changed a great deal over time. Uh, and I wrote there, it actually changed a lot over a period of time. For example, the music of the Baroque era, i.e., Bach, sounds quite different from the classical era, Mozart, which certainly sounds different from the Romantic era, like Tchaikovsky and Chopin, and you could probably compare them a great deal. The basic idea of common practice tonality, also known as CPT, or sometimes people just say common practice, is that both melody and harmony follow a hierarchy of pitch, where each tone of a melody and chord have the tendency to move in a certain direction and resolve in certain ways. This method, which came out of a time where we did not use equal temperament, that's very important, allowed the composer to play with the expectation of resolution to create excitement and unpredictability. And I said, note, unlike the middle of the 19th century, Western music was, or until the middle of the 19th century, Western music was purposely not tuned to equal temperament. Yeah, they purposely did not tune it to equal temperament. We might think, oh, we invented that. No, it existed. They didn't like it. So that when one modulated, there would be a different color than the original key due to different measurements between intervals. So when you don't tune the notes equally, you actually get a different quality in the key. So you actually could tell you were in a different place. And in fact, if you stuck to true temperament where you tuned the instrument for each key, which they often did on the earlier instruments, they fell out of tune. Then you actually would sense, oh, I'm a little bit uneasy. I need to get back home. So when you modulate a different key, it didn't really feel like the right place. Um, Meaning one feels like they were in the wrong place and need to get back right here until one returns to the home key. The reason why most music before the 20th century always ended on tonic. So today, like when we hear a pop song, if it modulates, it doesn't have to come back to the tonic key. I don't know if you notice, a lot of pop songs will modulate up a half step or something like that, or to another key, and it will never come back down. That's because we equal temper our notes on the all musical instruments. On piano, all the notes are the equal space away. Originally, it wasn't like that. When we use the word tonal today, again, tonality has many meanings. Uh, we use the word tonal today to mean many different things. However, common practice tonality is something very specific. For example, it is actually quite different from modality, including music based on diatonic church modes. In modality, chords move in succession without any direction, except when they arrive on the tonic, like the Dorian mode. So here I actually have a video. We could even look at the video. Okay, I probably need to put it in presentation mode. That might have been a little soft. I couldn't quite get it much louder. I could possibly play these from my other computer, um, but I think you could play through that on your own. So we will keep going. All right, so nope, go back. It was in the box there for a while. In contrast to common practice, so in modality, back to here, in modality, chords move in succession without any direction, except when it arrives on the tonic, like, for example, this Dorian mode. So we don't really hear a real chord progression. The chords just kind of float from one to the next. They don't really have any direction they need to go. Even the notes don't have a direction to go, except for arriving at tonic. You just know when you've arrived at tonic, but you're not being led to the tonic. You just know when you've returned to it. In contrast, common practice tonality, chords move in a progression with a specific direction. I have a little note down here. Modality is not only diatonic, but also can be chromatic, pentatonic, symmetric, microtonal, etc. So we're only talking about diatonic modality for the moment, but of course you can have modality on other modes. Breakdown of common practice tonal progressions. A common practice tonal chord progression has a clear sense of direction, which can be broken up into three areas: the home, the tonic, the pre-cadential chords, anything that's not 1 or 5 basically, and cadential, dominant. So home examples, normally it's 1. You can have the 6 basically function as 1 as a deceptive cadence. There's even rare times where the 3 can act that way, but normally it's 1. We have cadential chords like 5, 5, 7, 7 diminished 7, etc. Anything that's forming a cadence. And then pre-cadential examples. These are chords that are moving away from the tonic and get us to the dominant. Often these can be a couple chords. So for example, like 4, 2, 6, 5, not minor 5 in minor, but not normally 5, but 4, 2, 6, 7 in minor, etc. A minor 5, though, would actually have that kind of function too. A major 5 is the one that gets us on the cadence. Note, in 20th century or later, most things that we call tonal music in the period of the 20th century and later, i.e. like pop music or jazz, is more actually modal music with simply references to common practice tonality. So they might have some references to common practice tonality, but it's not that important that you follow the rules. So we'll talk more about this. Let's keep going. Hearing common practice progressions. When listening to a CPT progression, it is often easy to figure out which areas are home, pre-cadential, and cadential. So let's look at this in the presentation here. So you can see I have home, pre-cad, cad, home, even though it's a deceptive cadence, pre-cad, cad, home. So we can really tell. That was really, really, really soft. Let's see if we can do it a little louder right now. Let's see how it sounds this way. Maybe that was better. And actually, if we want, I can go back and play the modal progression in contrast to that. And listen how that sounds. And of course, you might point out that I have parallel movement and stuff like that. But even if I had more counterpoint in the way it moves, you still wouldn't get a clear sense of direction like this other one did. Get to that page on my other computer. Hear how each of those chords had a very specific direction to them? Again, if we go again, this is home, definitely. Pre-cadential. Cadential needs to move back to 1, but deceptive. Pre-cadential, setting up the cadence, has to resolve to 1. All right. So, as I talked about earlier, there's actually a hierarchy of pitch. Hierarchy means how things are mapped out, how they fit in, where they want to go. There's a hierarchy pitch in common practice tonality. I have a little link here. When you look at the video, on not the presentation materials on your own, you can always click here like this and pull up this whole sheet and print it off for your own reference. It actually helps with your ear training classes. You can think about these things, about these resolutions where each of the tones want to resolve. Also thinking about the home, pre-cadential, and cadential. For hearing ear training exercises, it's very useful. But if you think about it, all the tones in the scale here, if we set up a key, if I play certain tones, we feel stable. 3 feels stable, maybe, right? Very stable tone, but maybe goes, right? But other tones, we feel like we want that to resolve, don't we? All the other tones want to resolve. Or this is 4, wants to go to 3. So 2, 1, 7, 8, 4, 3. What about 6? Maybe like this, but really 6 wants to go up to 7. And in the minor key, 6 wants to go up to 7, which then wants to resolve up to 8, which you can see here, 6, 7, 8. This one, the minor key, again, stable, or like that. That was 3. 5 wants to go down to, but the other tones have the same function. 2, 1, that works too. 4, 3, 7, even stronger, 8, 6, 7, 8. 6 really wants to go up in the minor key because it doesn't feel like it belongs. It's been raised. Now, if we have the natural 6, wants to go down to, of course, the 5, and then 7 that's lowered wants to go down. So you can see the raised ones want to go up to 8. The lowered ones want to go down to 5 on these alterations here. Okay. It's actually good for ear training practice. All right, so hearing the hierarchy. Unlike modality, where pitch, where again, it only resolves to the pitch, only basically resolves to the tonic. Otherwise, it's just floating around. So let's take a look here on that. I'll play it up here for you since it's easier to hear. You might be able to hear these better, by the way, when you look at the presentation, but it doesn't really feel like it goes anywhere, except it resolves to the tonic there. I don't know why that's all frozen. My camera is frozen on this. Interesting. Okay. I'll see if I can get that back up again. I'll close out the camera for the time being, open up the new camera. Yes, I got that back. Thank goodness. All right, let's squeeze it back down. All right. Now we compare that to common practice tonality, where every pitch seems to have a sense of direction. One moment, I'm playing it on the other computer. Yeah, it leads right back to the tonic. In fact, even if I didn't get to the tonic and I stopped at one note before, you would want to go, right? So you can also play through this on your own. Note that the most defining pitches of any key in common practice tonality are the two tones that form the tritone, scale degrees 4 and 7, right? So we have 4 and 7 here, resolving, whose dissonants want resolution, and this brings the strongest emphasis of key, maybe stronger than even the tonic. All right, next one. All right, and then one of the most important aspects of common practice tonality is intention and realization, meaning you have the drama of where you want to go, and then composers will play with it. For example, we'll have a suspension, or we'll have an anticipation, or we'll have a deceptive cadence. All these things play with us, even, of course, having tonicization. We'll talk about that in a second. So, note that pitches in common practice tonality don't have to resolve or move in the way that we expect. They don't have to. In fact, we can tell tonic without the resolution. We will know where tonic is. Instead, playing with this expectation is part of the drama in music. So this first example is just how a single line sounds. And you'll notice here going, huh? Well, we just move up, right? So this leading tone wants to resolve here. But before we get there, we add a little color by going a little bit higher and doing an escape tone to get back. Excuse me. My other computer's playing funny games with me. Ah! Why? All right. Luckily, there's only 2 more examples that I probably have to play from it. Oh, that's really soft. Let me put up the volume there. That. One moment. One more time. See if I can get it to play again. Want to resolve? A little bit of color on there at the end. The fact that we added those 2 extra tones. Now let's hear another example. Down here. So we had an anticipation of the cadence, but then we had a suspension, and then we had a little neighbor tone to extend it. So all those little details are what kind of gives the interest to common practice tonality. Let me turn down the, it's a little bit noisy. All right, so next line. I don't have many more examples of common practice tonality, but perhaps the most significant aspect of common practice tonality is the reassignment of the hierarchy of pitch through changing the tone to give a new sense of key, either temporarily or permanent. So what am I talking about? In secondary dominance, for example, if we raise the 4th scale degree, right, in a key, suddenly we have a new leading tone, right? And so suddenly we momentarily feel like we went to the dominant. So, or if we raise the 1, we feel like we've tonicized the 2 on the new 2 tone. Going to a 4, of course, we don't have to raise anything, but if we lower the 7th scale degree on 1, it feels like it wants to move to the 4 because we've created a new leading tone. Essentially, we've erased the old leading tone and created a new one on the 3rd of the 1, and that, with the tension of the 7th, will cause it to want to tonicize the 3. So this lists all those, and you could take a look at that on your own. Again, this is actually really helpful for ear training class if you want to get some pointers on how to do that. So anyway, that's enough about practice tonality. We could talk for a long time about it, but let's go beyond. other options than common practice tonality. First, let's talk about pandiatonicism. Pandiatonicism? What's that? Well, oh, that S shouldn't be there. That's really funny. Diatonic can be, that's what I meant to say, I guess. Diatonic can be expressed without giving emphasis to a specific tonic or mode. This is called pandiatonicism. I obviously need to correct this. All right, there we go. A diet. That's okay. I can improvise. Diatonic can be expressed without giving emphasis to a specific tonic or mode. This is called pandiatonicism. Now we're on track here. Pandiatonic music can use either a full diatonic collection or a partial collection. So you don't have to use all the notes of the diatonic scale. You could just use some of them. In fact, a lot of pentatonic music, being a diatonic subset, can sound more like pandiatonic than modal. So a lot of times when we hear pentatonic music, sometimes it's not really clear what mode we're in. Is it Dorian? Is it Phrygian? The music is simply defined by what collection of notes appear and can use any types of chords: secundal, tertian, quartal, quintal, or anything. So what it is, it's music that sounds diatonic, but you can't really define what key it's in, what mode it's in, what note is functioning as the tonic, but we can identify the collection. So for example, this collection are the notes from the C major scale, but it's not really in C or any of the modes thereof. Let's listen to it. Let's see if this plays well. Okay, I think that was probably loud enough. You can always listen on your own, and I'll give you the links to these. All right, so that was a beautiful cascade of colors. This was all, homophonic, just chords and chords and chords. Obviously, it could be more contrapuntal and etc., or flourishing or arpeggiated, but that's a good sense of how music that is pandiatonic would sound, and it's using various combinations of colors, mostly kind of quartal, quintal, but some secundal type harmonies. Notably, the prefix pan or pan means all-encompassing with the word diatonic, so it means kind of like all diatonic, so all the diatonic notes. But it doesn't mean you have to use all the diatonic notes. It just means it stays in a diatonic area and doesn't define a tonic. There we go. Oh. It's a little hard when I'm not doing presentation. There we go. However, in pandiatonicism, just because the music is diatonic, I use two howevers, does not mean it cannot change between very different collections, making it chromatic music altogether. So what I mean? Well, we could have diatonic modes and shifting to different areas, different diatonic modes, right? What defines it is that each collection, taken separately, are still diatonic subsets. So let's take a look at this one here. So this one starts in one diatonic collection and then modulates to another diatonic subset. So this is diatonic, this is diatonic, there's a modulation, but it's all pandiatonic, it just shifts, right? Modulates. All right, now here's another example. Each of these individual chords themselves are diatonic, but it keeps shifting every chord's in a different diatonic subset. Not any two of them are from the same. Maybe this one and this one, but all the rest, there's like maybe three that you could possibly work out that fit. But in general, it just keeps changing. Yet they're all diatonic. The music is chromatic in movement, but each chord itself is diatonic. We'll play. There we go. In fact, not only do you want to necessarily go back and listen to this presentation on your own, you should really play through these on piano. That's probably the best way of getting to know it. All right. Next one. Next page. All right. Now let's talk about chromatic mediants and tritones. The music is getting a little small, so I will put it maybe into presentation mode if you don't mind, not looking at my face for a while. All right. So chromatic mediants and tritones. I'll try to stay out script. An interesting way of using major and minor triads is to move them by a chromatic mediant, a third, a chromatic third. I'll tell you what that specifically means in a second. Or a tritone, thus taking them out of the original diatonic context. To create a singly, means like single, one, chromatic mediant, move up or down by a major or minor third. So you could move the chord. You're basically transposing the chord without changing chord quality, i.e. major to major, minor to minor, moving up or down. To create a doubly, so first let's talk about the singly. So these are the singly ones. And if you see here, the chord class are all major chords, but they're moving by thirds. And it doesn't matter, you can move major third or minor third. It's always going to be chromatic because a third away using the same chord quality will be chromatic. It's impossible to do otherwise if you're moving by thirds. So don't get confused, all these in this case are above. So this one, let's hear how it sounds. And you can see the movement here. Okay, now let's listen to it when it's all minor chords. Also, very similar effect, right? You should really try playing through these yourself, by the way. So then, to create a doubly chromatic mediant, move them up or down by a third only of chromatic relation and change the chord quality. So before, the singly was just going major to major to major to major, but all thirds in either direction. It could be major third or minor third, but all the same quality of chords, so all major chords. These are all minor chords. Again, here we've moved up a minor third, down a major third, etc., but they're all minor chords. This is, you're going to a chromatic relationship to the chord, right? So there's no E flat in C major, and then we also change the chord quality to E flat minor. There's no E nat G in the E minor, so we are moving up to that and changing it to G major, etc. And you can do it up or down, but there's half the amount of options. These, you have 4 directions you go up a minor third, up a major third, down a minor third, down a major third, as long as you keep the same quality. If you're changing the quality, you have to only go to the one tone that's chromatic. That's the only way to successfully be chromatic. Let's hear it. And of course, you can combine doubly and singly chromatic relationships together. An additional effect is possible through moving by tritone, either being singly or doubly chromatic in these cases. So we're moving it by tritone: C major, F sharp major, C minor, F sharp major, C major, F sharp minor, C minor, F sharp major. Of course, it's symmetrical, so you're not going to move very far if you're only doing tritones. Normally use a combination with others, but here's what this sounds like. Say chromatic medians, both singly and doubly, along with the tritones, also combine together well. So you can combine all these techniques into the same progression. These techniques also work equally well on all diatonic chords, such as major minor 7, major 7 9, minor 7 9. Anyway, all of them. As long as it's diatonic chords, these techniques work well. And you'll see on this example, I opened up that screen, but if you look below it, you can see that I switch qualities. I sometimes go by tritone. I sometimes go major third. I sometimes go by minor third. You can mix it up, but these are all ninth chords here. So let's hear how it sounds. I gotta wait for that thing to go away. Doesn't that sound marvelous? I fell in love with this type of chord progressions when I was a high school student. I used to write compositions using these type of chords all the time. Jazz, we sometimes use these type of kind of chord progressions, moving by the chromatic mediant and the tritone. I think it's a absolutely wonderful way. It's a very chromatic, but yet every chord is still diatonic. And of course, you don't have to use the block chords like I did there. They can be spread out more contrapuntal, and the bass, you can use contrary motion while you're still changing to the tones of the chord, and pan-diatonically going through the scale, Lydian chords, Dorian chords, etc. It's a really wonderful technique. Okay. If we were in class, I'd probably be improvising those sorts of things. Maybe we'll do it another day for you. Panchromaticism. So pan with chromatic, that means all chromatic. So collections, it doesn't have to have all the notes, but collections that are chromatic, they're not diatonic collections. Panchromaticism is using chords that are not diatonic related to and give no sense of tonic. Give no sense of tonic. Diatonic, related, and give no sense of tonic. So here's a bunch of chords. They're all arpeggiated. These are absolutely not diatonic chords at all, but we can have chord progressions that use such qualities. I keep forgetting to silence my phone. Okay, there we go. Let's hear it one more time. Enjoy. You can tell, even though they're chromatic chords, you still feel movement from chords to chords. They each have their own unique color. All right. Might be very new to you, but you could find your own progression, I think. Okay. Let's talk about aggregation. Not aggravation, aggregation. Aggregations. We have come across the word aggregate before. It means to use all 12 notes in some ways. A composer could do this through chord progression or even write chords spaced out using all notes simultaneously. So let me make this a little bigger because it's hard to see and show you an example. Here's triads that through the series of progressions, I get all 12 notes. I pass through all 12 notes. Each of these actually have a different note in them. So here's an example of some chord progressions of triads that involve all 12 notes. Okay. And here's an example of extended tertian harmony, either using minor minor 7 9 11 or major major 7 9 13 chords. And so each two chords, each one has 6 notes, so we get 12 notes each. It could be like something like even like 5 notes and then 7 notes, but these are symmetrical in that kind of way. So they're not symmetrical scales, they're still diatonic chords, but they do form aggregates every 2 chords. I think that one's a little bit lovely too. And here's a progression, and every chord is all 12 notes, but I have spaced it differently. Now, I could have even gone wider because there's 88, keys on the piano, but it'd get really hard to see. So these are a little bit more clogged up, but there's quite a few different possibilities. So let's hear this. I don't know how well the speaker gets picked up on the mics, but you should probably play through these yourself. Obviously, you'd have to arpeggiate it with a pedal, but there is a sense of direction still in there. So my last comment here is don't confuse the concept of serialism with aggregate. Serialism is simply designating and transforming a certain order of intervals in a piece that may or may not use all 12 pitches, often avoiding repetition. An aggregate simply means to use all 12 notes, possibly using some repetition. However, the technique of writing 12-tone serialism, which you may have heard of, and avoiding repetition is called dodecaphony. Dodeca means 12, so 12 sounds. So you might have heard of that, but don't worry about that. We're not doing that right now. Okay. What else do we have to talk about? Texture. I might have to open up this texture again for you. I'm sorry. Maybe you can see this on your screen. Some of the music is so small. So let's do presentation mode here, though, first. Textures. This one needs to be in presentation mode. There are basically 4 textures. Oh, geez, another misspelling. As you can tell, This is like if I was lecturing you in real time, with off the top of my head. So, there are basically 4 textures one can use to put music together. Monophony, which means same pitch, same rhythm. Makes sense, right? Homophony, different pitch, similar rhythm. You could say same rhythm, but like we often sometimes have little changes in the rhythm. Polyphony, different note, different rhythm. Sure, makes sense. The notes are different, the rhythms are different. So we have same pitch, same rhythm, different pitch, similar rhythm, different pitch, different rhythm. Sure. Is that it? Well, what did we not use? Same pitch, same rhythm, different pitch, same similar rhythm, different note. There's actually one more. Heterophony. Similar notes, but a different rhythm. Huh? You probably weren't aware of that last one. Well, let's look through each of these. Kinds of monophony. Yeah, actually, a lot of things could be classified as monophony. One is the unison, everyone singing in unison. Another one is people singing in octaves. Were you aware singing parallel intervals, especially fifths? Especially fifths is a form of monophony. And having a drone going while someone's singing, certainly a long note, that would be monophony. Also, antiphonal music, so where you're kind of trading off the parts and the other one's holding a long note, that's considered a form of monophony. And then even if someone's doing an ostinato while someone else is doing the melody, that's really a form of monophony too. Let's take a listen to these four types. So all of those are forms of monophony. Now you will notice that once you start getting onto this category, well, they're kind of sounding a little bit like homophony, and this part's like, well, it's kind of sounding polyphony. Yeah, there is often a very close scale, lots of gray area in between that they do connect and cross over. Let's look at homophony. Well, you know what homophony is. You spend all your time learning about it. One is the choral style, right? Everyone's essentially going by mostly at the same harmonic rhythm, but also even melody and accompaniment. So here you have a melody here, and then you have the accompaniment below, some chords and a bass line being played. That's even considered homophony. So like most pop songs, they have like a chordal accompaniment under them, and then they're singing above it. That's considered also homophony. Let's listen to these. Yeah, a little jazzy thing there, right? Polyphony. Well, you know what that is too. And we basically have two kinds of polyphony. The imitative type, where you have one voice and then you have another voice come in with a very similar line. In fact, this is called a tonal imitation because it's not exactly the same. It's to help the harmony, but we can have a exact transposition or sometimes a little bit of a change. But things such as inventions, fugues, canon, that's all a form of imitative counterpoint. Or we can simply have just some free counterpoint. Here's such an example. This maybe sounds a little bit like Debussy using the whole tone scale. We could use any scale, obviously. A little bit of polyrhythm. Maybe we'll talk about rhythm another day. So here's heterophony. And there's actually a few types of heterophony, but the most common type is this. See how they're playing essentially the same line? Just one person is varying it? Yeah, it's basically more than one performer playing the same melody, but slightly differently. So it could be vastly different or just a little bit different. And we actually get this often in pop music where people aren't singing the melody exactly the same way. But this is the most common sort of texture outside of Western music. In a lot of folk music, like Korean traditional music, this is how they often perform. They don't perform polyphony, they don't perform homophony. Sometimes they perform monophony, but often they're doing the same line but varying it differently. As you can see, the basic line is D, E, F, G. And this part is doing D, E, F, G. Just a little bit differently. Oh, another form of heterophony is something we might call a hocket, where two different sound colors are performing the same melody, going back and forth between the melody. We often call this in 20th century music Klangfarben melody. Now you might say, isn't that monophony? Well, it kind of crosses over. The important factor is we are hearing two different timbres, two different colors, and that still gives us a sense that there's a coloring, a changing of the melody. In fact, they could cross over their lines too at just such a short pattern. I don't have, more than this. And then we have something called a stratified texture, which essentially everyone's playing the same thing, but people are often playing at different rates. This is not a mensuration canon, though, because they always hit the similar notes at the same time. Notice They're all at the same note here. Then these two people are the same note. This is all the same note. This is all the same note. This is all the same note. So they're playing at different speeds, but essentially still going through the melody at the same rate. Let's hear these different sorts of heterophony. And that stratified stuff, beautiful. You often find that kind of texture in Indonesian gamelan, in fact. Let's listen one more time. Okay. I'm back. All right. I haven't needed this notepad yet, have I? Okay. One last thing to talk about, bitonality and polytonality. One possible option is to put counterpoint in two or more keys. So two keys would be bitonal, more keys polytonal. So in fact, polytonality can describe bitonality too. Keys, so you can have two or more keys, modes, or other systems like symmetrical scales. I mean, you could put two together. Depending on the difference, it can range from more subtle to extreme colors. So I actually found the perfect example for this is I have this piece that I have for children to play. Although actually originally started as like little dictation examples for ear training class. But this one's only using diatonic scales and stuff. It's not mixing with other stuff, but you can hear very big differences between each of these. You could even play this yourself, I'm sure. So let me play it for you, and you'll notice there's a different key signature on each of these. Let me put it in presentation mode. You'll notice there's a different key signature on the top and bottom staff, and it has some very interesting colors. This piece is so easy to play. I urge you to play through it yourself on the piano and discover how these two keys worked well. So I'll play it for you here. So we have B flat and C are the first two keys. B and F is the next one. G and D come next. F and E. F sharp and B flat are next. E flat and C. Okay, and please listen on your own again to it because I talked through some of that. So that's gets us to where we want to be for today, and I'm going to give you some assignments as related to this. So please look through this and study it and ask me if you have further questions. See you soon.